Welcome back to Anti-War Radio. It's Chaos 92.7 FM in Austin, Texas. Streaming live at chaosradioaustin.org and antiwar.com/radio. Introducing our guest today, Carah Ong. She is, let's see here, the Iran Policy Analyst at the Center for Arms Control and Non-Proliferation. And her blog is IranNuclearWatch.blogspot.com. Welcome to the show, Carah.
Hi, Scott. Thanks for having me.
Oh, well, I'm really glad to have you here. Very interesting blog you have here. I've been reading it all morning, and it looks like you're really up to date on all the late-breaking news and analysis when it comes to America's so-called conflict with Iran. Well, I guess it is a conflict, not a necessary one in my view. But anyway, so I want to ask you first of all about your understanding of this new P5+1, they call it, the Security Council, UN Security Council plus Germany, I guess, the permanent members plus Germany, have offered a new deal by way of the European Union to the Iranians that if only they will quit expanding their uranium enrichment program, that we can begin to have talks toward the having of talks. Do you think that, did I even get that right, and does it sound like that's going to move forward?
Yeah, I actually like to call it the so-called new package of incentives because there isn't really too much different from this than previous iterations that have been offered to Iran by the P5+1. And the P5+1 is really the 5 permanent members of the Security Council, so Russia, China, France, Great Britain, and the United States, plus Germany is the +1. And the package was actually formally delivered by Javier Solana on June 14th. And Javier Solana is the EU foreign policy advisor, or foreign policy chief. So he actually went to Tehran and delivered the quote-unquote package of incentives. It's essentially a letter saying what could be on the table in terms of, starting negotiations with Iran. This new letter, is not all that much different, although, it does appear to include something that has not been included before, and it's not clear exactly what it is, but it may actually be that the U.S. would refrain from attacking Iran militarily, or that members of the United Nations would refrain from attacking Iran militarily. So that appears to be one of the only significant change, although, again, it's something that could be put on the table. That is somewhat significant because security assurances is really one thing that Iran has sought for quite some time and has not received. So that could be significant. And what's even more interesting, though, about this whole process is that, Iran in some ways tried to preempt this new letter by delivering its own letter to the Secretary General of the United Nations, Ban Ki-moon, and trying to put a whole host of things on the table. And, so they've used that in some ways for their own media purposes, but also to say, we also have a proposal on the table, and we'd like to find some sort of agreement between the two. I think something else that's somewhat interesting about all of this is that, in particular, the United States and President Bush, basically out of hand that the Iranians were going to reject this offer. And that doesn't seem to be a foregone conclusion at this point. I mean, there seems to be some things happening behind the scenes, or at least news coming out of Iran, that Iran may be willing to freeze its enrichment activities for 6 weeks in order to jumpstart the negotiations, at least with the European Union countries, as well as Russia and China. And the U.S., of course, would not join those negotiations until there was a full suspension, because, of course, the United States has maintained preconditions on any sort of negotiations. A lot of this is still up in the air, but we actually do seem to be in a time period where things are moving in a very positive direction.
Well, now the war party is saying in the London Telegraph, for example, that the Iranians have already rejected the offer.
Are you referring to the Con Coughlin piece?
Yes, I'm afraid so.
Con Coughlin. See, I knew exactly what you were who you were talking about. Con Coughlin is a huge propagandist, and he's actually repeatedly written articles that are factually incorrect. I think there are other problems with that piece as well. That Iran's moving forward with its atomic bomb program, misquoting or misrepresenting International Atomic Energy Agency reports. I view that article as complete propaganda, and he's known to be a very inaccurate reporter.
Mm-hmm. Oh, actually, you know what? There's another one here is actually the one I was thinking of, which is U.S. Pentagon doubts Israeli intelligence over Iran's nuclear program, which is, that headline is very out of context compared to the rest of the article. But anyway, it's by Tim Shipman.
Okay.
And it says in here, the assessment emerged as Iran, in effect, thumbed its nose at proposals by the West to freeze its uranium enrichment program in exchange for easing sanctions, et cetera, which is actually mischaracterizing the proposal, too.
Yes, absolutely. I saw that piece as well. And I think that piece was today as well. Yeah, I mean, again, there are certainly those who, are really pushing for a harder line stance against Iran and are really mischaracterizing, what exactly is contained in the letter and also what Iran's response would be. I mean, Iran, has not really said one way or the other what's going to happen. They are actually going to write a letter and have a formal response, and they have not yet done that.
Okay, well, I'll definitely be keeping an eye on your blog and that news. I did see in Gareth Porter's article, where I believe he was the one who broke this story last Thursday, and his article ended with a quote from a representative of the Grand Ayatollah over there saying that, well, it looks like George Bush doesn't want this, so we're pretty sure we're going to take it.
Yeah, I mean, the Iranians like to dance the dance, if you will, and, we would love to play devil's advocate whenever they can. Again, it's really not clear exactly what's going to happen yet. I don't want to say, definitively one way or the other, but there are certainly reports coming from news agencies within Iran, from state-run newspapers and television programs that by and large, there's the sense that they, should be willing to move forward with negotiation.
Mm-hmm. I have to tell you, I'm getting mixed signals here because on one hand, we have the drumbeat for war has been louder in the last couple of weeks than it has been in quite a long time, maybe since the early spring of 2007. And yet, at the very same time, we see moves toward negotiation, and we also see people like the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff making it quite clear in public that he's opposed. So I wonder what you think in the larger sense about the drumbeat for war now and whether this is something that you think is actually a danger of something happening in the next few months or not.
Yeah, I would actually argue that really the drumbeat has been increasing since October of last year. I mean, there tend to be these ups and downs in the news cycle, but really it's been a steady beat since October of last year when President Bush said that Iran, with the knowledge of nuclear weapons, could usher in World War III.
So I've told people that if you're interested in avoiding World War III, it seems like you ought to be interested in preventing them from having the knowledge necessary to make a nuclear weapon.
And Vice President Cheney made very similar remarks, very threatening towards Iran at a conference of the Washington Institute of Near East Policy at an event that they had held, and that was also in October. And then, come November, we had a new updated U.S. national intelligence estimate on Iran released, which had very significant findings, including, I think, one of the more important ones, that Iran was making its decision on a cost-benefit analysis, and, that some combination of threats and offers of incentives, if perceived as credible, could convince Iran to forego a nuclear weapons program and to keep its covert nuclear program, which the intelligence estimate found was halted in 2003, to keep the program halted. As soon as the key findings were released to the public, immediately we saw a campaign saying, that obviously President Bush knew about these findings before they were released. Otherwise, he wouldn't have, changed the goalpost in October where he said that it was the knowledge.
Right.
But, really, since then, we've seen just a continual drumbeat. Also, a move more towards not just the nuclear program, but also focusing on Iran's role in Iraq. In April of this year, President Bush, on April 10th, saying that Iran and al-Qaeda presented the greatest threats to American security in this new century. A tremendous focus has been placed on what Iran is doing inside of Iraq. Claims that they're supplying weapons and training to militias that are harming American troops. And so certainly they've been making this case for quite some time. But also what we're seeing is U.S. officials flying to Israel, Israeli officials coming here. Certainly Israel trying to make the case that they have different intelligence than the U.S. has over Iran's nuclear program, trying to make the case that Iran is bound and determined to get a nuclear program and that they must stop it. I think there really is a split in terms of who believes what and who believes, is the best way to solving all of this. And as you mentioned, Admiral Michael Mullen, Kevin Cosgriff, and our admiral in the Persian Gulf, as well as Secretary of Defense Robert Gates, have been very clear that we need to pursue diplomacy, that the diplomatic option is the best course of action right now.